The sharp crack of a gavel shattered the dusty silence of the auction block in Silver Creek, Montana Territory, 1876. Fiona Cooper clutched her 4-year-old son William to her chest, her trembling hands betraying the terror she fought to hide beneath a mask of dignity. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to them. Not here in the land of opportunity her late husband had promised would be their salvation. Next up, the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying across the crowd of rough-looking men gathered in the town square. A fine, healthy boy, 4 years old. Mother sold separately. Starting bid at $20. Fiona's world collapsed as rough hands tore William from her arms. Her desperate pleas dissolved into the hot summer air as the auctioneer continued his callous pitch. Her husband's debts, his sudden death from fever, and the unscrupulous banker who'd seized everything, it had all led to this moment of unimaginable horror. "Mama!" William cried, his small arms reaching toward her as a burly man held him aloft for the crowd to inspect. "Please," Fiona begged, her voice breaking as she lunged forward only to be restrained. "Please don't separate us. He's all I have." From the back of the crowd, a tall figure moved forward. Dust-covered boots struck the hard-packed earth with purpose as a broad-shouldered man in a worn leather vest and faded blue shirt made his way toward the auction block. His face, partially shaded by a wide-brimmed hat, revealed piercing blue eyes that narrowed as they took in the scene before him. $30, called a voice from the crowd. $35, countered another. The tall stranger reached the front just as the bidding continued to rise. $100, he announced, his voice deep and commanding. The crowd fell silent, turning to stare at the newcomer. "Sold." The auctioneer's gavel fell before anyone could counter the unexpectedly high bid. "Now for the woman, I'll take her too." The stranger interrupted. "Another 100. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. "Sir, we haven't even started the bidding on $200 for both of them," the man stated firmly, reaching into his vest to produce a leather pouch. "Right now." Whispers rippled through the crowd as the stranger counted out gold coins onto the auctioneer's table. Fiona stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her unexpected benefactor. His eyes met hers briefly, conveying something she couldn't quite decipher. Was it compassion? Determination? "Very well," the auctioneer declared, clearly pleased with the profit. "Sold, too." He paused, looking questioningly at the stranger. "Zeke Northwood," the man supplied, tucking his nearly empty money pouch back into his vest. "And they're coming with me now." William was placed back in Fiona's arms, and she clutched him tightly, burying her face in his hair as she sobbed with relief. But relief quickly gave way to uncertainty as she regarded the man who now, according to territorial law, owned them both. "Madam," Zeke said quietly, gesturing away from the auction block. "My wagon's over yonder." Fiona swallowed hard, summoning what remained of her courage. "Why did you do that? What do you want with us?" Her Irish accent, normally faint after years in America, thickened with emotion. Zeke's weathered face softened slightly. "Let's get clear of this place first," he said, glancing around at the dispersing crowd. "Then we can talk." They walked in tense silence toward a well-maintained wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. William clung to his mother, watching the stranger with wary eyes. When they reached the wagon, Zeke helped them up onto the bench seat before climbing up himself and taking the reins. "I'm heading to my ranch about 10 miles outside of town," he explained as they left Silver Creek behind. "You two can rest there and figure out your next steps." Fiona stared at him in confusion. "Our next steps? I don't understand." Zeke kept his eyes on the trail ahead as he answered. "I didn't buy you to own you, Mrs. Cooper. I bought you to free you." The words hung in the air between them as the wagon rattled along the dusty trail. Fiona tightened her arms around William, afraid to hope. "How do you know my name?" she asked, suddenly realizing he'd used it. "I've seen you in town. Your husband used to bring in timber to the sawmill." He paused. "I heard about his passing." "I'm sorry." Fiona nodded, her throat tight. 6 months ago. Fever took him in 3 days." She stroked William's hair as the boy dozed against her, exhausted from the ordeal. "I tried to keep up with the payments on our homestead, but Mr. Hargrove at the bank." She couldn't finish. "Hargrove's been foreclosing on half the county," Zeke said grimly. "Man's buying up land for Eastern investors." Been trying to get my place for years. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled, transitioning from open plains to rolling hills dotted with pine trees. Eventually, a modest but well-maintained ranch came into view, a solid log cabin with a covered porch, a large barn, and several fenced pastures where cattle grazed. "It's not much," Zeke said as he pulled the wagon to a stop, "but it's mine. Paid off last year." Fiona took in the peaceful scene, still trying to process the sudden turn her life had taken. "Mr. Northwood, I don't know how to thank you, but we can't impose. Perhaps you could take us to the next town where I might find work." "No need for that," he interrupted, jumping down from the wagon. "I've got plenty of room, and truth be told, I could use the help around here." He came around to help her down. Ranch this size needs more than one pair of hands. Inside the cabin, Fiona was surprised to find it clean and orderly. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end. Two doors led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. "You and the boy can take my room," Zeke said, gesturing to one of the doors. "I'll bunk in the spare room. It's smaller, but I don't need much." "Mr. Northwood, we can't take your..." "Zeke," he corrected. "And yes, you can. Just until you get back on your feet." He hung his hat on a peg by the door. "Are you hungry? I've got stew from yesterday that can be heated up." William, now awake and staring wide-eyed at their new surroundings, nodded eagerly. Fiona realized they hadn't eaten since early morning, and her stomach clenched painfully at the thought of food. As Zeke busied himself at the stove, Fiona took the opportunity to really look at him. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps early 30s, with brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face was tanned from outdoor work, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than his current serious demeanor indicated. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Spend all that money on strangers?" Zeke paused, his back to her as he stirred the pot of stew. "I've seen what happens to women and children sold separately," he said quietly. "Couldn't stand by and watch it happen again." "Again?" Fiona prompted. He turned, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "My mother and sister. After my pa died. I was 12, working at a ranch nearby. By the time I earned enough to go looking for them." He shook his head. "Never found them." Fiona's heart clenched at the pain evident in his voice. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He shrugged, turning back to the stove. "Long time ago now." They ate at the solid wooden table, William slowly relaxing enough to ask curious questions about the ranch and the animals. Zeke answered patiently, a gentle smile occasionally softening his features. After the meal, exhaustion overwhelmed Fiona. Zeke showed them to his room, which contained a large bed covered with a handmade quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a basin and pitcher. "Get some rest," he said, lingering in the doorway. "Tomorrow we can figure things out." Left alone with William, Fiona finally allowed herself to process the day's events. As her son fell asleep beside her, she stared at the ceiling, wondering what the future held for them in this unexpected sanctuary. Morning brought the sounds of life on a working ranch, roosters crowing, cattle lowing in the distance, the rhythmic chopping of wood. Fiona dressed quickly in the same worn dress she'd worn the day before, painfully aware that everything else they owned had been sold off to pay her husband's debts. In the main room, she found Zeke already up and cooking breakfast. The smell of coffee, bacon, and biscuits filled the air, making her stomach rumble. "Hope you slept well," he said, nodding toward the table where plates were already set out. "Figured you both could use a good meal." "Thank you," Fiona said, sitting down as William emerged from the bedroom, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "For everything." Zeke nodded, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Got some things to tend to today, but first we should talk about arrangements." Fiona straightened her shoulders. "Of course. I can cook, clean, mend. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Northwood." "Zeke, I won't be a burden." "Never thought you would be," he replied, setting a plate of food in front of William, who attacked it hungrily. "Ranch needs looking after inside as much as out. I can pay you fair wages, not much, but enough to help you save for whatever you decide to do next." "You're offering me employment? Not charity." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I'm offering you a chance, Mrs. Cooper. Same as someone once gave me." "Fiona," she said softly. "If I'm to call you Zeke, Then you must call me Fiona. After breakfast, Zeke took them on a tour of the ranch. He had about 60 head of cattle, a small vegetable garden that needed attention for horses, chickens, and 2 milk cows. It was a modest operation, but well managed and productive. Been here 8 years, he explained as they walked the property. Started with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back. Worked for other ranchers until I saved enough for a down payment on this land. Built the cabin myself. It's impressive, Fiona said sincerely. You've accomplished so much on your own. Not entirely on my own. Had help along the way from good people. He glanced at her. That's how it works out here. We help each other. Over the next several weeks, they settled into a routine. Fiona took charge of the household, cooking meals, tending the garden, and keeping the cabin in order. William followed Zeke around like a shadow whenever possible, absorbing everything the rancher taught him about animals and the land. Zeke proved to be a patient teacher with William and a respectful employer to Fiona. He never intruded on their privacy and always treated them with a quiet courtesy that gradually eased Fiona's initial wariness. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, William asleep inside after an exciting day of helping Zeke mend fences, Fiona found herself studying the rancher's profile. You're good with him, she observed. He adores you. Zeke smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. He's a good boy. Smart, too. He's never had a man take interest in him like you do, Fiona said quietly. His father was always too busy working, trying to make the homestead profitable. She paused, memories washing over her. Thomas wasn't an unkind man, just distant. Even before he died. Some men find it hard to show what they feel, Zeke replied, his eyes on the horizon. And you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. He turned to look at her, something unreadable in his gaze. I've been on my own a long time. Got used to keeping thoughts to myself. He hesitated. But I'm trying to do better. The air between them seemed to change, charged with something neither was ready to name. Fiona looked away first, her cheeks warming. I should check on William, she said, rising from her chair. Zeke nodded, his voice soft as he replied. Good night, Fiona. As summer faded into autumn, the ranch work intensified with preparations for winter. Hay needed to be stored, wood chopped, food preserved. Fiona worked alongside Zeke whenever William was napping, learning more about ranch operations than she'd ever known at their failed homestead. One crisp October afternoon, they were working together in the barn, sorting through supplies, when the sound of approaching horses caught their attention. Zeke tensed immediately. Stay here, he instructed, reaching for the rifle he kept mounted on the barn wall. Fiona's heart raced as she watched him step outside. Through the open barn door, she could see 3 men on horseback approaching the house. One she recognized immediately: Lawrence Hargrove, the banker who'd foreclosed on her home. Northwood, Hargrove called, his voice carrying clearly in the still autumn air. Just the man I wanted to see. What brings you out this way, Hargrove? Zeke's voice was neutral, but Fiona could see the tension in his stance. Business proposition, Hargrove replied, dismounting with the casual entitlement of a man accustomed to getting his way. The 2 men with him remained mounted, their hands resting near their holstered guns. Railroads coming through. Investors are paying top dollar for land along the proposed route. He gestured expansively. Your property is right where they want to build. Not interested, Zeke said flatly. Never have been, never will be. Hargrove's cordial expression hardened. Don't be hasty. I'm authorized to offer 3 times what this land is worth. Land's not for sale at any price. The banker sighed dramatically. I'd hoped we could handle this as gentlemen. He glanced toward the barn, and Fiona instinctively stepped back into the shadows. I understand you've taken in Fiona Cooper and her boy. Interesting development. Zeke shifted, subtly placing himself between the barn and the visitors. What's your point? Just that it would be a shame if the territorial authorities learned you're harboring a woman of questionable circumstances. Hargrove smiled coldly. Unmarried woman living with a bachelor? People might talk. Territorial Family Services might take an interest in the welfare of her child. Fiona gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. The threat was clear and terrifying. Are you threatening me, Hargrove? Zeke's voice had dropped to a dangerous quiet. Merely pointing out potential complications, The banker replied smoothly. Think about my offer. I'll be back in a week for your answer. He mounted his horse. Good day, Northwood. Fiona watched as the three men rode away, her heart pounding with fear. When Zeke returned to the barn, his face was grim. You heard, he asked. She nodded, wringing her hands. I'm so sorry. I've brought trouble to your door. No, Zeke said firmly. Hargrove's been after this land for years. He's just using you as leverage now. He set the rifle down, running a hand through his hair in frustration. But he's not wrong about one thing. Your situation here is precarious. We should leave, Fiona said immediately, though the thought sent a pang through her heart. We can go to another town where no one knows us. And then what? Start over with nothing? Zeke shook his head. No, there's another solution. What? He met her eyes steadily. Marriage. Fiona stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What did you say? Marriage, he repeated. It would protect you and William legally. No one could question your presence here or threaten to take him from you. But that's you can't possibly. She struggled to find words. Zeke, marriage is a serious commitment, not just a legal convenience. I know that, he said quietly, and I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't. He hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. If I didn't care for you both. Fiona's breath caught. Over the past months, she'd grown to admire and respect Zeke deeply. His kindness toward William, his quiet strength, his integrity all had awakened feelings she'd tried to ignore out of loyalty to her late husband's memory and fear of her uncertain future. Is that the only reason? She asked softly. To protect us from Hargrove? Zeke took a step closer. No, he admitted, but I'd never presume. You've been through so much, and I know your heart might still belong to your husband. It doesn't, Fiona interrupted, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Thomas and I married young. He was a good man in many ways, but we were never truly. She paused, struggling to articulate the truth she'd rarely acknowledged even to herself. We were never partners, not the way. Not the way you and I could be, she wanted to say, but couldn't find the courage. Understanding dawned in Zeke's eyes. Slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wild creature that might bolt, he reached for her hand. His calloused fingers were gentle as they enfolded hers. I'm not asking out of convenience or pity, he said, his voice low and sincere. These past months, watching you rebuild your life, seeing your strength and kindness, I've come to feel things I never expected to feel again. He squeezed her hand softly. But I would understand if you need time, or if you don't feel the same. Tears pricked Fiona's eyes as the walls she'd built around her heart began to crumble. I do, she whispered. Feel the same. But I'm afraid. Of what? Of losing everything again, she admitted. Of trusting and having it all taken away. Zeke nodded, understanding in his eyes. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, he said honestly. But I can promise to stand beside you through whatever comes. You and William, you've become my family. The family I thought I'd never have. A tear slipped down Fiona's cheek as the truth of his words resonated within her. We feel the same, she said. William talks about you constantly. And she took a deep breath. I've never felt as safe, as respected, as I do with you. Zeke's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, Fiona rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, before deepening into something that spoke of promise and possibility. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Yes, Fiona whispered against his lips. That's a yes. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Silver Creek. William stood proudly beside them, holding the simple gold band Zeke had purchased from the general store. The ceremony was small but meaningful, attended by a few neighboring ranchers and their families who had come to respect Zeke over the years. When Hargrove returned the following week, he found not a vulnerable woman and child he could use as leverage, but a legally married couple with documents proving their union and witnesses ready to testify to its legitimacy. This changes nothing about the land, he blustered, his face red with frustration. The railroad's coming whether you like it or not. Actually, it changes everything, Zeke replied calmly, his arm around Fiona's waist. I spoke with Judge Patterson yesterday. He's quite interested in your methods of acquiring land, especially after I showed him the documentation of what happened to the Cooper homestead. Hargrove's face paled. What are you implying? Nothing yet, Zeke said, but I suggest you take your offer elsewhere. And if I hear you've threatened any other families in this territory, the judge will receive a very detailed account of your business practices. After Hargrove departed, his threats now empty, Fiona turned to Zeke with wonder in her eyes. How did you manage that? Zeke smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. I've been keeping records of Hargrove's dealings for years. Just needed the right time to use them. My hero, she teased, though the gratitude in her eyes was sincere. No, he corrected, pulling her close. My family. As winter settled over the Montana territory, the Northwood Ranch grew warmer with the genuine love that had blossomed within its walls. What had begun as an act of compassion had transformed into a deep and abiding connection that neither Fiona nor Zeke had dared hope for. One snowy evening, as they sat before the fireplace, William asleep with his head on Zeke's lap, Fiona watched her husband gently stroke her son's hair. He asked me something today, Zeke said quietly, looking up at her with emotion in his eyes. What was that? He asked if he could call me Pa. Zeke's voice caught slightly. Said his real Pa was in heaven, but he thought maybe he could have too. Fiona felt her heart swell with love for both of them. What did you say? I told him I'd be honored, Zeke replied, his eyes shining. That I've thought of him as my son since the day I brought you both home. Fiona moved to sit beside them, resting her head on Zeke's shoulder as his free arm wrapped around her. You saved us that day, she murmured. No, Zeke disagreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. You saved me. I was existing, not living. Just a man with land and livestock, but nothing that truly mattered. He looked down at William, then back at Fiona. You gave me purpose. A family. Love. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Fiona and Zeke Northwood found the peace and belonging they'd both sought for so long. What had begun with the crack of an auctioneer's gavel had become a testament to the healing power of compassion and the unexpected ways love finds its way home. Spring came early that year, bringing with it new life. The garden Fiona had expanded thrived under her care. Cattle grazed peacefully in green pastures, and William grew taller and more confident by the day. But the most precious new beginning was the one growing within Fiona herself, a child that would be born to parents who had chosen each other freely and with full hearts. As she stood on the porch watching Zeke teach William to ride his very own pony, a birthday surprise, Fiona rested her hands on her gently rounded belly. In this moment, surrounded by the family that had been forged through adversity and bound by love, she knew with absolute certainty that some endings were truly just beginnings in disguise.